Hello everyone, today we are going to talk about atrial fibrillation. The heart has 4 chambers, 2 atria on top and 2 ventricles below. And under normal conditions, everything is tightly coordinated. An electrical signal originates in the sinoatrial node in the right atrium and spreads rapidly across both atria, causing them to contract almost simultaneously, pushing blood into the ventricles, which then contract shortly after in their own coordinated fashion. In atrial fibrillation, that precision is completely gone. The problem originates in the atria, where ectopic foci, most of them sitting right at the openings of the pulmonary veins, start firing completely out of control, generating somewhere between 350 and 600 electrical impulses per minute that bombard the atrial myocardium simultaneously. The atria simply cannot respond to that level of electrical noise, so they lose all coordinated contractile activity and quiver. The AV node does its best to filter this chaos, but the ventricles still end up contracting irregularly, typically somewhere between 100 and 160 beats per minute in someone who isn't being treated. Patients experience atrial fibrillation in very different ways. A significant proportion, roughly a third, feel nothing at all and are diagnosed incidentally when an ECG is done for an entirely unrelated reason. Those who do have symptoms most commonly describe palpitations, a sensation that the heart is beating rapidly or irregularly, and fatigue and breathlessness on exertion are also very common, because when the atria aren't contracting properly, ventricular filling drops by around 20 to 30%, and that reduction in cardiac output is felt quite clearly. When you look at the ECG of a patient in atrial fibrillation, the P waves have disappeared entirely, replaced by a chaotic, low-amplitude fibrillatory baseline that almost looks like electrical static. And the ventricular complexes arrive at completely unpredictable intervals, with no repeating pattern from one beat to the next. That combination of absent P waves and an irregularly irregular ventricular rhythm is the ECG signature of atrial fibrillation. The causes are varied, but most come back to the same core idea: a structurally or metabolically stressed atrium. Hypertension is by far the most common underlying driver, causing gradual atrial fibrosis that creates a perfect substrate for the reentrant circuits that sustain atrial fibrillation. Heart failure, coronary artery disease, and valvular disease, particularly rheumatic mitral stenosis, are other major structural contributors. Thyrotoxicosis is a cause that's easy to miss, but critically important, because excess thyroid hormone directly raises atrial excitability, and simply treating the thyroid can sometimes resolve the arrhythmia entirely. Acute triggers like sepsis, pulmonary embolism, and electrolyte disturbances can precipitate episodes even in people with no prior cardiac history. Diagnosis is confirmed on a 12-lead ECG, but in paroxysmal cases where episodes are intermittent and self-terminating, the ECG may look completely normal when the patient walks in, and you'll need a 24 or 48-hour Holter monitor or a longer-term event recorder to actually catch it. The workup should also include thyroid function tests, an echocardiogram to look for structural disease, and a basic electrolyte panel. The most dangerous consequence of atrial fibrillation is stroke, and the numbers are striking. Atrial fibrillation is responsible for 15 to 20% of all ischemic strokes. The mechanism is straightforward. Without effective atrial contraction, blood stagnates in the left atrial appendage, a thrombus forms, and when that clot embolizes into the systemic circulation, the brain is the most common destination. Stroke risk is stratified using the CHA₂DS₂-VASc score, and a score of 2 or more in men or 3 or more in women is the threshold for starting anticoagulation with a direct oral anticoagulant, apixaban, rivaroxaban, or dabigatran, which have largely replaced warfarin because of their more predictable dosing and significantly lower risk of intracranial bleeding. Once stroke prevention is sorted, you turn to managing the arrhythmia itself. And here, the decision comes down to rate control versus rhythm control. Rate control means slowing the ventricular response to below 110 beats per minute at rest, and this is achieved using beta blockers, bisoprolol or metoprolol, or the calcium channel blocker verapamil, which works by slowing conduction through the AV node. This is appropriate for most stable patients who are not severely symptomatic. Rhythm control, on the other hand, means actively restoring sinus rhythm, and there are a few ways to do this. Electrical cardioversion delivers a synchronized DC shock to the chest to reset the heart's electrical activity. It's the fastest way to get someone back into sinus rhythm. Alternatively, antiarrhythmic drugs like flecainide, which is used in patients with structurally normal hearts, or amiodarone, which is preferred when there's underlying structural disease, can be used to chemically convert the rhythm or maintain sinus rhythm after cardioversion. In younger patients with frequent paroxysmal episodes, catheter ablation targeting the pulmonary vein foci is increasingly offered as a more definitive long-term solution. So that would be it. I hope you enjoyed the video and that you found it helpful. Feel free to leave a like or a comment and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. See you next time.